Stronghold Crusader Definitive Edition is the expanded remaster of the 2002 classic RTS castle sim, which helped put the series on the map. But beyond the desert battles and brutal sieges was a world crafted by passionate artists and animators. Today we're diving deep into the journey of reimagining this classic, uncovering the challenges, the breakthroughs, and the upgrades that make Crusader better than ever. First up, we have those all too memorable characters. The stalwart Saladin, the rampaging Richard I, the flowery Philip II.
I am surrounded! Send your armies to my aid!
Crusader's commanders and their eccentric personalities help bring the game to life. To find out how our team is bringing them to life, let's talk to one of the original Crusader artists, Jorge.
Hola, me llamo Jorge, soy diseñador de caracteres 3D. En el antiguo Crusader yo creo que la gente le gustaba mucho el estilo de juego, que era, yo creo que era un poco más diferente de los juegos de aquel entonces, e incluso de los de ahora, diría yo. Creo que se enamoraban de los caracteres, de las voces, de los sonidos, de todo. Ver todo lo que he hecho y verlo otra vez es un poco extraño y me trae muy buenas memorias de la historia del juego. Encontrar el material antiguo ha sido bastante duro porque fue hecho con versiones de 3 Studio Max que casi ya ni tenemos y gastamos plugins en aquel entonces que ya ni las compañías de ese plugins existen ya. Así que ha sido bastante penoso y bastante duro de encontrar, de traer esos caracteres, edificios, todo otra vez, sí. Ha sido bastante duro. Sí, en el lanzamiento se esperan 4 caracteres y mis favoritos es el centinela y la joya. Para crear los personajes utilizo principalmente un programa que se llama Character Creator 4, que es para hacer humanos. Para hacer el resto de ropa, sombreros, armas, gasto un Blender, ZBrush, y para hacer el texturado de todo en general, gasto el Substance Painter 3D. Estos caracteres los hago con mucha resolución, con texturas buenas, con buenas tecnologías, y hacerlo parecer un poco antiguo fue bastante complicado para hacerlo un poco más que pareciera del antiguo Stronghold. Me he tenido que adaptar a técnicas de hace 20 años para que se mezclen bien esas técnicas, porque si no, el contraste de estilo sería demasiado. Sí, yo creo que estos nuevos personajes van a traer mucha diversión y recordar mucho el pasado. Los jugadores se encontrarán con mucho mejor gráficos, tendrá mucho más resolución. Se está renderizando todo nuevo, tendrá mucha más definición, pero todo tendrá el mismo estilo con el que tenía antes, pero con nuevos gráficos.
Fighting on behalf of Crusader DE's new and returning lords or their loyal units. These troops play an important role in every castle siege and skirmish brawl. So let's chat to senior graphic designer Darren about his role in animating these warriors and preparing them for war.
My name is Darren Warble, and I am an artist and an animator for Firefly Studios, and I have worked here for 22 years. There was not, for me, a lot of added pressure to doing DE. It was really more excitement, more knowing that I was working on something that we knew our fan base wanted. So, if anything, there was almost a little bit of, I don't know if it's relief, but it's more like, they're saying they want this, we're working on it, so that felt really good. My role in this project was to do all of the units. That's the military units, the peasant workers, and the animals. I had to go in and make them 200% scale, like we did with the original Stronghold DE. And in this particular case, most of the units were missing. So I had to remake them from scratch. But that's kind of a blessing in disguise, because when you do that, there's a lot of things that you can fix from the original time that they were made. It's a little bit more work in some ways, but it was something that I was really excited to be involved with doing. The major hurdle that I had to deal with is I'm, for this project, using still very old software, almost the same software that was used the first time around. So on the one hand, it was good because the files were native to it. It's an old version of 3D Studio Max. That was a bit of a challenge because I'm using older software, but it was also a benefit because, again, the files were more native, so I didn't have to do as much converting. My process in updating the units for Crusader DE. One thing, as I had mentioned, was we have to make them 200% scale, but also we're adding frames of animation so that they play smoother. Also, maybe fixing some of the animations that were there originally. We can take advantage of the fact that we're doing it again to make the units work even better this time around with the game. In terms of making the units themselves, since I was working on it alone, I had to really have a very efficient workflow. I was able to then go in and really focus on the artistry of the units, modeling them first, texturing them, rigging them. Rigging means putting like a bone structure inside of them so they can be animated. We have a lot of units and we've added a lot of units. And each frame it's not a 3D game where it's like units are animated like in real time as a 3D unit in the game. These are all rendered into individual frames. So I was literally dealing with tens of thousands of frames, and they have to be pixel perfect or else they won't even work when I deliver them to the programming department. So these were all different challenges that I had to overcome in making sure that I was doing this. And being the sole person working on these units, I had to take a lot of responsibility for making sure that it worked properly. For the new units, like the Bedouin units, I would work closely with the design department where they would find some reference for what they were looking for. Then I would model those and texture them up. And before I animate them, I would show them to the designers because once you animate, that takes a lot of time. And if there's like a little thing you want changed, you still have to re-render everything. Usually I would make like a walk cycle, like a turntable walk cycle. And they could then look at that animation of just a simple walk cycle and then make a good determination because they would see it from all the different angles. And then once that's approved, then I would go on and then I would make all the new animations that I would need to make, keeping in mind the look of the other units that they are either referencing or kind of tied to thematically. It was not too hard to keep a generally consistent look across all the units because I would use this, again, the same process, the same software, so the lighting would work the same way. So that would kind of equalize a lot of things that might otherwise have been a variable that might have made them look like they don't quite fit in. And I look at the units now and I believe the feedback that I've been getting is that, yeah, they fit in really well with what's already been done, and yet they look distinct in terms of their new role and what their new place is in the game. One of my favorite new units to work on was the Heavy Cavalry Camel unit, where it was a challenge because it was a larger unit and it had 2 riders and it had a lot of different items that were like strapped to it between the shields and leather straps and belts and all of that. And I knew that because it was a bigger unit and it was an exciting unit that people might give it a little bit more scrutiny. So I tried to spend a little bit of extra time just to get it just right. And another part of the challenge was because there are 2 units riding the camel and each one of them has a different purpose depending on what the activity of the unit is in the game at that moment, whether it's doing a ranged attack or whether it's doing a close quarters melee attack or things like that. It was definitely challenging to get the 2 guys to work together. But again, that was one of the fun challenges, and I spent a bit of extra time on that particular unit. In terms of animating the camels, what I would often do is I would start with an animation that I already had, because a lot of 4-legged animals walk in a similar way in terms of the gross movements. But then I would look at actual footage of camels walking and try to see what I could do to kind of make that work. We have a lot of new animals. We have the condor, the crocodile, the goat, the striped hyena. We updated the look of the deer and added family members to the deer as well. My favorite new animal that I worked on for DE wasn't even really hard. It was the crocodile. I think why I enjoyed it is because it was different. The way it animates is a bit different. It's lower to the ground. And when it dies, like, just having it flatten out like I do with some of the other animals it's already flat, so it didn't really make sense. So I actually gave it a flipping animation, knowing that alligators and crocodiles, I believe, have like the spinning death that they have sometimes, whether they're attacking or maybe when they're dying. At any rate, I played off of that idea. So when the crocodile is killed, it actually like flips over, and that was kind of fun to work on. In addition to all the siege equipment that was already in Stronghold DE, we also now have the fire ballista. Whenever we do the siege equipment, it takes extra care because a lot of times there's multiple dudes pushing it, for example, and they all have to be animated separately and have to work with the the ballista itself, the piece of hardware. And so that's always kind of fun to work on as well. But it is a bit of a different workflow in the sense that it takes me a little bit more time to make sure everything is coordinated properly.
From the tallest towers to the smallest grains of sand, every pixel of Crusader DE's buildings and environments have to work in harmony to tie the setting together. Here's 3D artist Neil to share his experience of forging Stronghold Crusader's classic desert castles and landscapes.
Hey, my name's Neil Benzie, and I'm lead artist on Stronghold Crusader Definitive Edition. So the majority of my work from Crusader is all 3D based. I worked on all the buildings, the landscape and the foliage, as well as some of the UI aspects such as the background. And obviously working with the other artists to deliver the vision for the project. Compared to Stronghold 1 Definitive Edition, we were actually missing most of the source assets from Crusader, so we knew almost everything would have to be remade from scratch. I think whenever we go about making changes to buildings or adding new stuff, the main focus is always to stick with the original design. We don't really want to make changes for change's sake, and any changes should ultimately just enhance or improve. You know, we want to respect the original vision and just bring more into focus what was there originally. All the new environment assets ultimately driven by the design department's requests, usually when they want to incorporate those into the new missions and campaigns. We'll have a back and forth to decide the requirements and make sure that they fit into the existing landscape design. So the new landscape features are ultimately designed to enhance the player's immersion for the missions that they're meant to be set in. With the historical campaigns, Tom ultimately came up with a concept for how we would present each of the stories, and there would be a unique book for each campaign. So I went about designing some new books for each of the campaigns so they'd have a unique distinction between each other. Each of the campaign books' design is meant to give a little hint on the story or setting of the campaign.
The desert awaits you.
Remaking the introduction with Richard swinging his axe, we did feel was very important, seeing it's the first thing you see when you boot up the game. Touching old characters is always a tricky one. Sometimes it can be a bit contentious. We spent quite a bit of time making sure everyone was in agreement with any changes that we did make to them. I think the thing I'm most excited for players to see is the recreation of the Skirmish Trail sandbox screens, as well as the new Sands of Time sandboxes. For me, one of the things I remember most in the original was the Skirmish Trail menus, and I was always fascinated by the little sandbox with the characters in them. So to be able to recreate the originals and create new ones was really exciting. All the Skirmish Trail sandboxes are made in Blender with 3D assets that we've created. And we created a completely new workflow since we had none of the original assets. So it allowed us to sort of reimagine it a little bit with still keeping the original spice.
So we've talked about the characters, units and environment of Crusader DE, but your journey to the desert begins before you reach the battlefield. From the main menu to the skirmish setup, our historically inspired interfaces need to blend with the in-game world to create a seamless medieval experience. Here's 2D artist Tom to tell us how he did it.
Hi, I'm Tom, and I'm a 2D artist at Firefly Studios. I was excited to work on the project because I actually came in on Crusader 2, so I had that kind of like understanding of the original game because I took a lot of nuance from Stronghold Crusader for Stronghold Crusader 2 way back then. My role on the project is quite wide, starting with the UI, looking at the flow of the original game, how you navigate through different screens to get to the bits that you want to play. We had a look at the original game, we had a look at Stronghold Definitive Edition as well, because that has a framework there that we can work off of, as well as the original game, to try and modernize it. I tried to make it feel like it fits and flows together, like you're moving through parts of a story or you're moving through a house, room to room to room, and having nods to the past. When it comes to trying to keep the essence of the original Stronghold, but then also modernizing it, we did look at every single screen, and you can go overboard with it, right? I hope we haven't done that, and there is the essence of the original. There is a lot of panels and different objects within the way that you go through, whether it's multiplayer or even a skirmish setup. It was very panel based, so being able to give a different take on that and talking about it and coming up with, does this really need to change?
A fair tax system all right.
When it comes to changing of settings from going from Europe to the Middle East within the Crusades, and you're looking at shifts in timeline as well. For me personally, it's looking at reference, whether it's from museums, imagery. I was personally looking at things from both the European standpoint and the Arabic standpoint. You're looking at paintings from the time period. It can also come from fabrics and tapestries, ceramics, buildings, mosques, looking for geometric shapes, patterns and things that are repeatable and repeated throughout that time. And then from there, kind of simplify and break it down. I'm not just straight up copying a pattern, but there's elements and feeling from the reference. There's nods for Bedouin as well, which were referencing patterns that they had on tents to nomadic face tattoos. It's always a difficult balance. There's a push and pull of European to Arabic to Bedouin. I wanted to try and keep it almost period correct. And as you go through the illustrations, some of them might be a little bit more detailed than the source material that I'm pulling inspiration from, but it's all grounded within the source material from that time. They wanted to expand and add more illustrations for the historic campaign. So we have custom illustrations for each storyline as well as each chapter within the story. When it comes to looking at a previous artist that doesn't necessarily work with us anymore and using their sketches, it is difficult to try and recreate some of these objects and things, but trying to get as close as possible. I tried to use as much of the original sketches as I could and making sure that it kind of felt like it fell within this world that they had created. When it came to colouring, I've gone for more of a watercolour effect that kind of will relate to the other illustrations that I've done within the game. When it comes to like new icons, they're conceived from the original game. A case of this would be with the victory and defeat. Just having a box with victory or defeat is a bit anticlimactic at the end, and it's something that I've wanted to have in the games where it's a bit more grand. I'd concepted a banner that then I gave to Neil, and then Neil came up with an animation. And then for defeat, I was like, oh, people like using fire in Crusader. Let's burn the ends of the banners and have it embers and things like that. And from that, it grew from just having one banner to we could have a banner for if you chose Bedouin, or if you chose European Crusaders, or if you were the Arabic Lord, your banner would change. There's quite a lot of like smaller improvements. All of the assets were quite small from the original. Some things don't necessarily translate very well at the larger sizes. Things like the older Lord portraits, the old Lords from the original game have had remasters of the videos within the game. And when it came to their portraits, it's kind of like one of those things where they didn't quite stack up to the new portraits of the new Lords. So one of the things that I pitched was I'd painted over and painted up a couple of the original Lords to the new size, and I'm sure everyone has a beloved Lord that they would like to have their portrait as. So obviously getting the original 16 Lords up to the same standard as the new 4 Lords was very important to us. We felt we needed to make sure that the quality was across the original characters as well as the new characters. All the old Lords have had a little bit of a lick of paint. They feel like they sit next to the new lovely renders that Jorge's done. One of the main things that kind of drives me to do what I do and why I enjoy what I do is that the fans enjoy our games. I'm looking forward to seeing what people create.
Thanks to our amazing devs for giving us a peek behind the scenes into Crusader DE's artistic development. And thank you for watching. If you want to see more deep dives, gameplay, and updates, hit that subscribe button. And head over to Steam right now to wishlist Stronghold Crusader Definitive Edition, launching on July 15th.